this morning we are continuing our conversation on the Constitution and constitutional reform. And who better to have this conversation with this morning than Dr. Vanus James, Tobago economist. Good morning and welcome, Dr. James.
Morning, Shenell.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to have you in this morning. We know that, because of the rains, we have not seen you in studio, but nevertheless, it's still a pleasure to have this conversation. Now, we've heard a lot about the constitutional reform conversation coming up again, especially seeing that very recently the Prime Minister made an announcement out of that Constitutional Reform Committee report, indicating that one of the things that would be changed would be those three ships on the coat of arms. That just being one of the recommendations or things that were highlighted by the committee. But you have been doing work in this area for a very, very long time. And this has brought you to publishing another one of your books, and this morning we're going to be talking a bit about that. So firstly, tell us about this new book that you are releasing. Give the public a bit about that.
Well, I think of it as a report of what communities are saying about constitutional reform. So it's not a book in my ordinary use of that language. It's a community report. And what we did was to go around to the communities between January and July and find out from them exactly what their thinking is on the critical provisions needed in the Constitution to ensure their capacity to drive community development. And they gave very clear answers and justifications, some of the wisest statements I've heard in my professional career, anywhere in the Caribbean, to say nothing of Tobago itself. I'd be happy to share some of those insights with you.
Well, we look forward to hearing those insights as well. But even before we get into that, when it comes to an economic development plan, I remember conversations with you before when you indicated that there's a time when the data expires. Talk to us about the last time this type of research had been done and why it was so integral for you to have fresh data set.
Well, what you normally do when you're modeling the development path of the economy is you use all the standard national sources that you have on the aggregate output, the breakdown of aggregate output, trends in prices, savings, and other things like those. And that are the underlying drivers of development. And one of the critical things we've come to discover, well, we've known since Arthur Lewis, but elaborated well by the work of Lloyd Best, is that there is a dimension of our economy that is us. And you have to keep up to date all the time on what that dimension is doing. That's one of the reasons I went to the communities, to find out what they're doing and what they're willing to do and able to do. That dimension, in the case of Tobago, is the community-based economy, and that's the economy that kept Tobago afloat after the collapse of sugar in 1884. Since then, we've not been able to really replace the sugar industry with anything else, and notwithstanding the efforts with cocoa and coconuts and so on. So today, what we have is largely a community-based economy in Tobago, other than what the THA is really doing. Tobago, of course, is an island of many communities, including Scarborough, of course, as one, Canaan, Bonaccord, and so on. And so you could track what they're doing by going to them and asking them, well, where are you, what you're trying, and so on. Just to mention, for example, just recently, the University of Trinidad and Tobago and Shell Trinidad and Tobago undertook a massive study of the fishing industry. And these, you could see from the evidence, are all community-based industries. It's a community-based set of activities built around all the coastal villages of Tobago. And so you've got to keep on top of what the communities are doing, because that's the only economy we really have in Tobago other than the THA's employment program. And so you've got, that's the point about keeping up to date all the time. But
Right.
we've been modeling the national economy, and we can fit Tobago into that. And that's part of why I went to the communities.
Right. And which communities did you go to, and what type of sampling mechanism did you utilize?
Well, these are focus groups. I wish I could have done all 42 villages, but I ended up doing 12 in the 6 month period, about one every 2 weeks. And we got about, in some villages, you have focus groups of 23. That's a big focus group. Standard focus group sizes would be 10 to 12 persons to give them time to explain what they're saying. We did, the smallest we had was somewhere in John Dial. There was about 9, 10 persons, but we visited Hope, Mason Hall was the start, Castara, Canaan Bonaccord, Georgia, and so on, Roxborough, you know, uh, Lance for me. We tried to find a good balance of all those. It's not random sampling, it's focus group selection. Random sampling is a whole different methodology. But the focus group methodology is very important from its style, meaning you get the understanding of what the respondents are saying, and at the same time you are able to represent what communities as such are communicating about what they desire. That works on a scientific basis as well.
All right. And tell us a bit about some of the questions that were asked, and as you indicated earlier, some of the insights that you received from, your research in the communities.
But the most basic question of all, of course, is what do you mean by community development? Because the modeling that we're doing of the national economy tells you that one of the critical development drivers of the economy is the community-based economy, what Lloyd Best called the residential sector. That's us. That's the part of the economy we built from the Sunday plots of slavery all the way to today. That's where we developed our language, or foods, or culture of engagement with one another and with strangers. You know, when I was young, strangers were top priority in Charlottesville. When strangers come, they get the best of everything: food, culture, everything. So we developed a whole music, uh, housing stock, a whole range of elements that represent an economy. Capital goods on the one hand, consumer supplies like agriculture and fishing and so on the other hand. And so that's a critical driver of every economy across the Caribbean. And the thing is, you go to them and you ask, the first question I ask is, what are you doing with your community development? What are you trying, what is the community trying to do? And the farmers came and other people like those, and they told us, this is what community development means for us. In every community, we got a clear answer to what they're talking about, and that's the first part of our report. And then we asked them, well, okay, if you're going ahead with this business of community development, what do you want to facilitate continuation of that activity to drive a critical sector for economy in terms of a share of the national budget? If you want that, if you don't, say no and explain why no. If you want it, say yes and explain why yes. That's how focus groups are conducted. The next thing we ask is, if you really want to drive your community development with your initiative as against wanting the THA to do it for you. Do you want to drive your own community development, or you want the THA to do community development for you? And they gave us clear answers to that and clear justifications. And in that context, do you want, if you want to organize your own community development, then do you want to have the authority to do it, or would the village councils that you have now that are volunteer arrangements work for you? What do you really want? Do you want the authority in the Constitution to constitute your community as a share, as a part of government, alongside the THA and the central government, or the communities in Trinidad and the central government and so on? They gave clear answers to those. And then if you're doing those things, all right, the THA will want to get involved in the process of making rules and laws, as all of us in Tobago are clamoring for. the THA and the Tobago Island government for that matter. Well, what do you want in relation to that? Do you want to have the ability to tell the THA what you want done in your community with respect to laws and rules that might affect you? Or do you want the THA just to go ahead and make those rules and laws without consulting you? And they gave clear answers to that and so on. And then we asked them, well, okay, do you want to take that up to the level of the central government? If the central government is much more powerful than the THA, if they are making rules and laws that would affect you, do you want to have a say? And they gave clear answers to those kinds of questions. One of the main questions we asked, however, is like you go to a place like Lance for me. It's as though the world has stood still since I was a little boy. So I asked the question for them and for every other community, should there be a device set up in the government that is responsible to ensure equality of access to development opportunity across Tobago, so Lance for me is not left behind? When I went to Roxborough, they complained bitterly about being second tongue and being left behind. And all of them gave a proper answer to that question. That goes to the issue of the senatorial device. All across the world, you put senates in place in order to take responsibility for equality of access to development opportunity and equality of status. It's the same issue between Tobago and Trinidad. And they all gave very clear, very wise answers to those questions. And finally, when you are operating as a community and the THA is operating as the Tobago level government, the Tobago Island government generally, you will find that when you're trying to run your communities, you'll end up in disputations with the THA or even with the central government, and you may have to take the THA to court. What kind of judiciary do you think would facilitate fair judgment so that you don't have dictatorial edicts from on high without your being able to get justice? And they gave us a very clear picture of the kind of judiciary they want. They fundamentally, quickly, the answer to that is judges who know what we're doing and why we're doing it, and therefore could call the case on an informed basis. So these are all questions, the core sets of questions we posed. And based on that, they gave clear answers. And then they said, document what all of that means for the design of the Constitution that gives us the things we want, the rights we want in the country.
Excellent. And some of the key insights, you said some very interesting things came out from these discussions from the individuals who would have participated in the study. So please, share with us some of those insights.
Well, the single most important thing I find is that the communities are all saying they want to pursue their own development. They don't want to wait on the THA, and they made it clear what the THA is doing doesn't work for them. So, sorry, so they want to have uh, enough rights encased in the Constitution to pursue their self determination, to look after themselves without having to wait on the initiatives of the THA or the central government. That's a critical insight. That means they have things to do in crime prevention in their communities. They want to do investments and they want to protect what they're doing, protect their community members, and the right to do that must be part of what we're talking about in constitutional reform. They want not only the right to protect themselves, but the right to organize themselves as communities, as government, not the village council volunteer arrangement that is there now. That right must be encased in what's recognized as a set of community rights alongside the individual rights in the communities. The critical thing about that point is that what you then are creating, if you go down the road they are talking about, is a buffer, a mechanism that lies between the individual and the might of the central and the Tobago government, so that people can come together using their communities to give meaning to the individual rights in the Constitution. so that an individual doesn't have to fight the THA directly. That individual could use the power of community networking to guarantee the protection of their individual rights. And after this conversation with the communities, I've come to the judgment that this may be one of the best ways to ensure individual rights and protection from victimization and all of those kinds of things citizens are complaining right here in Tobago about all the time. The weight of the THA on the Tobago population and the Tobago economy is clear for everybody to see, just with the fact that the THA employs the vast majority of our people. And the significance of that has to be blunted by strengthening the relative role of community empowerment so that the community could sit as a buffer between the individual and the THA and the central government. So you're less susceptible and vulnerable to victimization of any kind and for any reason. Another thing that is tied to that the communities are pointing to is related to the judgment made by the Constitution Reform Committee that they want to guarantee individual economic rights. And one of those rights that they point to is the right to form a union. Now, to be in a union, for example. Well, okay, if that's so, what you're recognizing is the individual as a worker in a private or public enterprise. But that's not the only way to think about economic rights. The communities are entirely right to say we may be doing much more economic stuff in our communities. We may be developing agriculture, developing fisheries. All those are economic rights, the right to be able to engage and participate in those kinds of things, not just being a worker for somebody else. And that set of rights are much more important when you think about the development of Tobago than the right to be in a union. So, if you can guarantee in the Constitution the right to be in a union, they are saying, well, why can't you guarantee our right to organize our communities in such a way that we could pursue our most important sets of economic rights? To develop private enterprise, to support private enterprise, to develop community-owned businesses. In the work that I just supervised for oversight, chaired the oversight committee for the study of the fisheries sector in Tobago. One of the things we found out is this is a huge industry in Tobago, driven by individual businesses. Communities may want the right in this context, do want the right to support their fisher pirogues and semi-industrial vessels and so on, to help them develop more, to train them better, to facilitate, to promote the training and so on, to build that industry. That's just one example of an important industry for Tobago that communities could lead the development of. So they're talking about community development in that sense. And they're saying that if all of those things are going to be economic rights that we're going to have, we need to have access to a decent, fair share of the Tobago budget or the national budget, better thinking of it as the national budget, that we could spend to develop our initiatives and form an anchor on which we could raise additional funds from our diaspora and other interested investors so we could pursue much more rapidly the development agenda that we've been undertaking from slavery to today. So that's the sort of stuff they're talking about. And I think they're
All right.
deadly right.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back here, we're going to talk a bit about what communities are saying about the impact of crime at the community level and what are some of their recommendations for that. So we'll
Very
see you soon, right after this. Back to Good Morning Tobago right here on Tobago Updates. We have been chatting with economist Dr. Vanus James, and we're talking about the Constitution, constitutional reform, his latest report, and what we can expect. Now, before we went off to the break, I indicated that when we come back, we're going to touch a bit on crime at the community levels. Now, we see that there have been a surge in crime here in Tobago, and people within the community are now becoming quite worried not only of its personal and individual impact, but also for its economic impact. Tell us a bit about the how that was brought up in the research and some of the conversations that you had at the community level.
In pretty much all the communities, not exactly all, but most, 90% of the ones we spoke to, the community leaders made this point. First, if you want to prevent this surge in crime that we are observing, you have to empower us. We know all the persons from Tobago who are involved in this stuff. They live in our communities. They live here. We saw them grow up. We saw the problems evolving. We knew what should be done to redirect youthful lives and so on. And we were helpless to do it because we didn't have the authority and the resources. And they said, crime prevention, to put a stop to this surge, you have to remember that crime prevention is not policing. It's policing too. But the main part of it is prevention in the early stages of life when you could intervene 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 years old and redirect people's lives with education and training and skill development and suggestion to better parenting, upgrade of support for parents, and so on. One guy in Plymouth made the point. Uh, Many of the homes may need help because parents have to go to work and their children come home and they are unguarded and unsupported. It's not today like with everybody with a wage employment. It's not like when I was young, when your auntie and your cousin would be your caregiver when your parents not around. That has to be dealt with in the communities, and we need both a sufficient level of resources. Maybe the government could contract out some of the support they need to us, but we also need the authority to develop the programs to help the homes, help the families, help young people. One lady in Canaan Bonaccord said this to me in one of those sessions. She said, when Dwight York was evolving as a footballer, we had young people here in Canaan Bonaccord who were just as good or better than Dwight. We wanted to help them. Dwight was fortunate to get the help of Neil Wilson and Coach Sinclair and so on. We wanted to help these young people. They would have developed in the way we wanted them to develop, would have gone abroad, made money, come home, bring that back to the community and so on. We couldn't do it because we didn't have either the authority or the money. Many people like those slipped through the cracks, and now we're hearing their names in criminal type activity and gangs and what have you. If we do not deal with this at the community level, it will get out of control in Tobago just like it's getting out of control in Trinidad and Jamaica. And I think I put that issue to Dr. Wendell Wallace, who is Tobago's premier criminologist. And he said, they're right. Crime prevention, and to put an end to what we're watching, is not simply a policing matter. It is fundamentally a crime prevention matter anchored first and foremost in the communities, foremost in the communities. Well, I think that's a lesson that we have to learn. The way we organize now, we wouldn't be able to put a stop to this kind of thing. But if we listen to what the communities are saying, we'll have a chance because we'll nip it in the bud when we see it early in the lives of children. We don't
All
have to
right.
send them anywhere to do it. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. And when we even look at the other aspect of that, which you said it's not only a policing matter, but when we do look at that policing matter, what are some of your opinions on the proposal for a Tobago police service and the discussion surrounding having the Department of Safety and Security under the Tobago House of Assembly?
Well, I have long agreed that Tobago needs a layer of policing outside of the current layer of central government control. policing. And the communities do need to protect their own turf as well. So you need multi-layered policing, like you see in a place like the US, for example, where you have policing from the county level all the way up. So it's not just the FBI and the state police and stuff like that. It's all the way through. Wherever you see a problem that needs policing, you have to anchor the establishment of policing arrangements at all those levels, complemented by private capabilities and all of that. So I agree that by and large we need to do it properly, but you're not going to get good policing with the system of government that we are operating now, uh, either in Trinidad and Tobago or in Tobago, because authoritarian government cannot manage sound policing. They do not have the access to the information flow that is needed for detectives and police generally to be efficient and effective in understanding and tackling and solving uh, crime. We need to build a different culture of information sharing in the society so that it becomes a habit in the culture. You don't have to have the police after every crime run around and say the people need to share information with us, because you've put in place by the system of government you have arrangements for full-fledged information sharing that the police too will benefit from. Education will benefit from it. Healthcare will benefit from it. As it is now, we're running on a 20% information tank, and that is not going to allow us to deal with crime. So it's not enough just to put a layer of policing for Tobago. You have to set up the whole information system, and that means fundamental reform of the structure of THA and Tobago Island government generally.
Right. And you also indicated that a number of communities have indicated the need, for them to be able to protect themselves. How does the firearm users license and being able to equip citizens, to protect themselves come into our conversation?
They're not talking about, from the conversation I have with them, they're not talking about everybody having a gun and a license to carry a gun and so on, although that goes with farming as a part of the rights we've enjoyed over a long period of time. But they're not talking about that. They're talking about the community having the opportunity to take responsibility for securing what they're doing. So, in other words, if we're investing in better vessels and better infrastructure and development of enterprises that are making money and so on, the community needs to be able to take steps to secure its overall development program, its investment program, its citizens and so on. So you need a community level capacity to secure, like at Tobago Island government level, capacity to secure. All of them working hand in hand with different levels of authority to intervene and deal with matters. You see it, as I said, elsewhere in the world. There's no reason Tobago couldn't be part of that, or Trinidad and Tobago for that matter. So they're not talking about everybody having a gun in your house to shoot back at people and all of that. They're talking a much more organic, community based networking initiative. That's the right answer, I think, too.
All right. And we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come back talking a bit more about that report that you've generated and the report that came from the Constitutional Reform Committee and what does that say for Tobago and Tobago's autonomy. So we will chat more about that right after this. See you soon. To a brand new dawning as the passion start arise. Good morning, and welcome back to Good Morning Tobago right here on Tobago Updates. We are chatting with economist Dr. Vanus James, and even as we return and we wrap up this morning's conversation, we're still chatting about constitutional reform. And we know that recently there was a report generated by the National Advisory Committee on Constitutional Reform, and there in that report lies an area on the Tobago House of Assembly, and there is discourse surrounding allowing Tobago to make laws for Tobago. Talk to us a bit about that, giving more insight to the public and how this feeds into some of the research that you did and the feedback that came from the community.
Well, before I answer you, let me just let you and the public know that our work was funded and sponsored by people in Tobago, people in Trinidad, and people across the Caribbean. And so copies of the report are available to everybody. And in it, you will see evidence that what we did was document what the people said. We asked the questions and people answered with explanations. We documented everything. So what I'm saying is not me putting words in their mouth. It's them telling you what they think. Now, as it relates to the report by the committee put together by Dr. Rowley, uh, on the matter of autonomy in Tobago, you see evidence in the report that the conversation with Tobago was inadequate. The idea that Tobago ought to be able to make law, it has been with us for a long, long time. Ever since, even before the 1980s, when Robinson and Murray championed the idea, even before the 1970s for that matter. The idea was there. All the way back, you could go to the work of Bigot and APT and so on. Tobago needing the right to look after itself properly. But that is not simply about the ability to make law. Everything is about how you make law. Because you don't want draconian laws to be made. You don't want laws made by people that dictating to Tobagonians rather than Tobagonians making laws as part of a process that enables them to govern themselves properly. And that is what is missing in the document. There is no understanding of the need for a proper structure of government in Tobago. And if you look, there is also no understanding of the need for a proper structure of government in Trinidad. The communities in Tobago, for example, are saying they want an elected Senate in Tobago, an elected Tobago Senate. The committee makes the recommendation that there should be a national Senate, which is part elected and part appointed. That makes no sense at all. If the goal is to give your elected Senate responsibility to ensure equality of status across the board and to take responsibility for fairness in your development budget, that cannot be done by any set of appointees. You have to have people who are elected with the responsibility to represent the interests of communities across the country, citizens across constituents across the nation, and the same would be true in Tobago. So the idea that there should be an elected Senate in Tobago is completely missing. That's the first thing, and that's a critical part of the business of autonomy. Uh, Autonomy is good governance. It's not Tobago versus Trinidad. The second thing is, in that context, the idea that the THA itself has to be properly designed to make law is critical, and it's also missing. You need to have an executive council of 8 or 9, but if you're going to do that, you will need enough non-executive members on the winning side to control the executive, like you see it going on in Westminster in Britain. If you have 9 and the allies of 9 as you have it today, there can be no mechanism by which the representatives of the peoples specialized in making law could control that executive council. So that's why the executive council is so dysfunctional in Tobago today, and that is not properly addressed. And when you know they're not addressing it properly when you look at what they propose for the country. 18 cabinet members and a House of Representatives of 59. Well, with that kind of design, there can never be oversight and representative lawmaking in Trinidad because you just don't have enough non-executive members. You would need somewhere near 36 non-executive members to control an executive of 18 with the power of an executive in their hands. So 59 wouldn't cut it in terms of the arithmetic. The cabinet will still continue to be an executive cabinet controlling the process of lawmaking. That is not understood in the national design, and it's not understood for sure in the Tobago design. So this document is fundamentally flawed from the point of view of its understanding of what we need. And there's a final point to be made to the public, and that is this. When all is said and done, what you need is a device, a governance arrangement that could make sound policy. If you're going to develop a place like Tobago or Trinidad and Tobago or Jamaica or any other Caribbean country, a critical thing you have to understand is what the communities understand. Government is part of the economy. Government is not the oversight of the economy. It's an important part of the economy. So you have to give effect to what the communities want in terms of their ability at the community level to prosecute the issue, prosecute the issue of entrepreneurial development. When that is missing, you're dead in the water from the start, no matter what you put together. That's completely missing in this document. So there's no real arrangement for sound policy making. And and that arrangement could only exist in the form of a significant non-executive majority that could oversee and outvote the Executive Council in Tobago and the Cabinet in Trinidad. Without that at the core, and without an elected Senate to complement that process, you will not get sound policy making, and you won't get the arrangements in place for citizens to come and share what they know. You remember, to make sound policy, you need full information, not public service information, not friend and colleagues who support your information. You need information from the whole society. And that needs a device in which people are feeling free to come and share what they know, regardless of the side they're on. And in the absence of a sufficient non-executive information collecting component of the parliament, where people are going to work in the parliament just to do that, in the THA just to do that, not to be in the executive, you cannot make progress. So this document misses this fundamental critical part of the design that is needed for you to talk about autonomy in Tobago in a serious way.
Right. And even as we wrap up our conversation this morning, please remind us how we can get access to the report. Is there a PDF copy online for those that are not in Tobago? Let us know.
Well, we have not put a website together or anything like that as yet. We are going to make arrangements. Just this morning, I was talking to someone to make arrangements to host the document somewhere where you can go and get a copy of it for free. We'll make that public very, very shortly, by the early next week, to say the least. But in the interim, you send me an email and ask for a copy, you'll get it. That's pretty easy to do. And my email you have to make public. It's my name, vanus.james@gmail.com. You send an email, you'll get a full copy of the report.
Right, and that is vanus.james@gmail.com. Guys, if
Yeah,
you
all
are
right.
all right. If you are outside of Tobago and you want to get access to that report on what is happening at the community level, you can definitely just send a direct email and get access to it. But unfortunately, this is where we wrap up the discussion this morning. And we want to thank you so much, Dr. James, for letting us know all that's happening on the constitutional reform front and all the work that you have been doing at the community level to allow Tobagonians to have a voice or a say where Tobago community development particularly is concerned. Again, thank you. Guys, we wrap up our
Thank you,
show
Shannon.
this morning right here. We want to thank you so much for sticking with us. Thank you for your likes, your shares, and your comments, and everything that you have been doing to make Tobago Updates the #1 broadcaster here on the island of Tobago. Again, thank you and have a great day.
Hear me neighbor, 60,000 people strong.